Hey boys and girls, it's me, Eddie McGrath, the Science Guy. It's been a little while since our last episode, but today we've got something special. For this episode, we went over to North Star Elementary, and we got to sit in on a 4th grade class. How awesome is that? Miss Tiberi over at North Star had an awesome activity planned for her kids. Now, hold on just a minute. What is this episode about, you ask? Well, let's just say it's the basis of life. Today is all about botany. What's botany, you ask? Botany is the study of plants. Today, you are going to take the role of a botanist, and you're going to learn about the 2 main classes of flowering plants. So without further ado, welcome back to Try Science. I love the smell of flowers in the meadow. It's amazing how something so small can grow into something so beautiful. Now, before we see the kids participate in today's activity, let's go over a few vocabulary words. First, we have a seed coat. Now, I'll bet you're wondering what a seed coat is, right? Well, a seed coat is just that. Just like you and me, a seed needs to stay warm and protected. However, a seed can't just go out and buy a coat, or can it? No, I don't think so. Nonetheless, a seed coat is essential for the plant to grow successfully. It protects the seed from not only the cold, but also from insects or microbial attacks. The seed coat also regulates the amount of water the seed gets so that it doesn't drown or dry out. Now, the cotyledon is the main part of the seed that stores food. In order to grow big and strong, we all need to eat healthy, and the same applies to young seeds. When the plant grows out of the ground, it will make its own food with sunlight, water, air, and the leaves. But while the seed is in the ground, it doesn't get sunlight. So the cotyledon acts like the seed's lunchbox. The cotyledon is also a main difference between monocots and dicots. You see, monocots have only one cotyledon, but dicots have 2. You'll learn more about those 2 later on in the show. Finally, the embryo is the part of the seed that contains the tiny leaves and roots. These will eventually grow into a beautiful plant and flower. Want to see more about how a plant is grown? Well, check out this video from our friends over at SciShow Kids.
First of all, seeds come in lots of different shapes and sizes, but they're all made of 3 parts. An outer shell called the seed coat, a tiny baby plant that's inside the seed called the embryo, and some plant food for the embryo called endosperm. The seed coat has an important job. It covers the entire seed, protecting the little baby plant inside and keeping it from drying out. The seed coat also has super sensing powers. It has special chemicals in it that can tell when the seed is in the right place to start growing. For example, the sunflower seeds and the pumpkin seeds in your trail mix sense that it's not safe to grow. After all, seeds can't grow when they're surrounded by raisins and chocolate chips. So while the seeds are in a bag or in your hands, it's like they're asleep. The seeds are still alive, but they're dormant or inactive. Some seeds can stay like this for hundreds or even thousands of years. Great question, Squeaks. To get started, every seed needs water, the right temperature, and the right amount of light. Once the seed has these 3 things, like when it's planted in some nice wet soil, the embryo, or baby plant, gets the signal to start growing. For plants, this growing process is called germination. First, the seed coat lets some water through to the embryo, but the embryo needs more than just water if it's going to grow. Good thing, there's a whole bunch of plant food right there inside the seed. Until the plant can make its own food from sunlight, which it will need leaves to do, it relies on the endosperm for energy. It's like the little baby plant has its own backpack of snacks. So the embryo keeps growing and taking in more water until the seed coat cracks open and the embryo kicks out a kind of a foot. But not at all like my foot. The first part of the plant to come out of the seed is the root. The root always grows downward, no matter what way the seed is planted. A seed can actually tell which way is up and which way is down. So the root pushes down deeper and deeper into the soil, looking for more water and minerals to feed the baby plant. Once the plant is all grown up, those deep roots will have another job. They'll help keep the plant from falling over or blowing away in the wind. But soon after the first baby root finds its way into the dirt, another part of the seed pops out. This time, in the opposite direction. A shoot, which has the stem of the plant and a few leaves, pushes its way up towards the sunlight. Once the shoot breaks through the soil to the open air above, we say that it's sprouted. Now the plant doesn't need the endosperm anymore because it can make its own food from sunlight. With enough water and sunlight and the right temperature, the young plant will continue to grow, getting bigger and growing more leaves until it's an adult plant and it can produce seeds of its own. Next time you're about to chow down on a handful of sunflower seeds, just think, it's like you've got a whole field of flowers right in your hand.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? To think that all three of these parts work together to help grow a flower is just a beautiful example of Mother Nature working hard. So now that you know, let's head on over to the class and watch the kids try science.
Today we are going to look at comparing monocots and dicots. I'm going to look at the dry seed coat, the soaked seed coat, what it looks like under a magnifier. I have two different forms of magnifiers. I have magnifiers where I can measure in centimeters or inches. I have broken it down for you on this paper so you can see the different parts of the seed. Inside, look for those details. Draw what the inside of monocot or dicot, whatever your group has been given, looks like, and then write at least 5 observations.
Project about seeds, and we're cutting open dicots and monocots.
Could you go further in detail? You told me the length. What about the width?
It's about half a centimeter.
Half a centimeter?
Mine was a centimeter.
It's a centimeter?
It's half an inch and a centimeter. What did I do? I'm really bad at drawing the seed coat. For the lima beans, we've seen like a shiny coat for a clear coat in the lima bean, and it was hard and kind of smooth, but it was mostly hard. To go inside of a seed and look at all the different structures inside of the seed, and it's pretty cool. There's two. I know, it went like, oh my god. Whenever they say.
Make sure you show the end, the little embryo there, okay? When you break it apart, you'll be able to see, like you see on your sheet, the embryo, Cotyledon, the seed coat we already see on the outside, and the food storage, okay?
It's a great science project to eat lima beans.
Our first question was, are either the dry or wet seed alive? How do you know?
I'm guessing the wet seed was alive because when we were doing, I noticed that we had a tray of seeds over there, and as they were soaking over time, they were feeding the little plant inside, and it was making it grow. With the dry seeds, there's no food for them, and there's no source of like anything for them to eat or anything, so they're just gonna get hard. That's why the wet seeds were alive and the dry seeds were.
Okay, good. So the wet seeds were alive, Nicholas was saying, because there was water to bring them back to life. In the water, it soaked up the water, and the parts of the seed, if you're able to get the dry seed open, which is challenging, the parts of the seed are not going to be as evident because they're in a stage of dormancy. On a count of 3, let's whisper dormancy. 1, 2, 3, dormancy. Okay, if something is dormant, it's in a stage of inactivity. So the dry seeds are dormant. They're inactive. The wet seeds are beginning the process of germination.
Boy, did that look fun. I wish I had a magnifying glass. Oh, wait. Ha! I do. This is perfect for our next lesson, where we take a bigger look at the differences and similarities between monocots and dicots. Now, as you learned previously, a key difference between the two is the number of cotyledons they have. Now, before we go on, it's important that you understand how they got their names. Mono is a Greek word that means one, and di is a prefix that means two. Therefore, a monocot has one cotyledon, whereas a dicot has two cotyledons. Now take a look at the following video where more is explained about monocots and dicots.
We have a whole bunch of flowering plants that we're going to plant. By flowering plants, I'm talking about the Angiosperms, which are any plants with flowers. And those are different from the Gymnosperms, like pine trees, the mosses, the ferns, and all of the other primitive plants.
Every one of these flowering plants we got can be divided into one of two categories, either a monocot or a dicot.
So here's the backstory. For flowering plants, biologists had finally divided them up into two groups, the monocots and dicots, the members of which tended to share similar features. So here are the features we most commonly use. Monocots like this lily are usually in multiples of 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Dicots have petals generally in multiples of 4 or 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Monocots typically have parallel veins, while dicots are net veined. If you pull up a monocot, most of the time it'll have these fibrous, spreading, or they call them adventitious roots. While the taproot, that's classic dicot. Stems. Cut the stem of a monocot in cross-section, and you'll see something like this. Vascular bundles scattered all around. While in dicots, they're usually at the edge. Cotyledons. This refers to parts in the seed. Monocots, also known as Monocotyledons, means one cotyledon in the seed. And dicots, like this bean, have 2. Okay, so there's about 250,000 species of flowering plants in the world. And with the 5 characters that I just showed you, about 75% of those have been classified as dicots, and about 23% have been classified as monocots. What that means is there's about 2% that don't fit the classification so well. So recently, they've kind of revised our understanding of flowering plants. We think the evolutionary tree looks a bit like this. You see, early on, a few groups broke off. And then, other small groups came off of that. In the end, the monocots were classified here, and the dicots are classified here. But, other than the water lily relatives and the magnolia relatives, which contain most of that other 2% of flowering plants, the rest are still monocots and dicots. Okay, so now go out and see if you can identify those plants.
Wow, that is pretty interesting stuff. I always thought that flowers were all in the same group. I guess it's just like us. We're all humans, but we've got different families just like the flowering plants. Anyway, are you ready to put your newly learned botanist skills to the test? Well, let's take a look at the following images and decide whether they are monocots or dicots. So, how did you do? I'm sure you did great. You know, it really warms my heart to know that you boys and girls are taking your flower knowledge one big step forward. So now, what is the deal with cotyledons and dicots and monocots anyway? Why does it matter? Well, botanists categorize flowers into 2 categories based on how the plants are made up. This is important because it can ensure that we can take proper care of the plants and give them all of the necessary materials that they need to grow big and strong, just like you guys. You need the right food and water to live a long and healthy life. For example, an herbicide for a monocot won't necessarily work on a dicot. So by understanding how flowers are made up, we can better nourish and thus help our flowers grow big and strong. Now that you've learned a few key differences between the two, let's head back to North Star and take a look at the final activity where kids compare and contrast monocots and dicots.
You will each fill out your own. Similarities will go in the middle of our Venn diagram. Similarities between monocots and dicots. And then over here is just monocots, over here is just dicots. Okay, so items that are specific to monocots or dicots. You could talk about the leaves, stems, but I want you to at least list one item under each monocots and dicots that is specific to that type of flowering plant. Monocots and dicots are the abbreviation for monocotyledon and dicotyledon. So I wrote the full word for you, but this one side is basically monocots and dicots, just in the full word form.
For monocotyledons, the leaves, they have, for the veins, they're like vertical.
For similarities, we can do like the seeds. The seeds both are protected by the seed coat.
What differences do you notice from the inside of the seed?
That looks like a taco.
It does kind of look like a taco, yes.
They both have a baby plant inside. They both have, okay.
Wait, did you say yours was small?
This one feels like it's like kind of bumpy, but it's smooth. This one is like slimy and like it's a little rough.
A little rough? This has an angiosperm, this does not. Discuss together why might that be.
We got a lot of the seed coat off. I'm guessing because our seed was a little bit bigger and it can soak up more. Just like a sponge versus smaller sponge. The bigger sponge is probably gonna suck up more.
Right. Very good.
Before we go on, let's review some of the differences and similarities between monocots and dicots. First, monocots have a single cotyledon, but dicots have two cotyledons. Second, monocots have long, narrow leaves. Dicots have much broader leaves. And then there's the veins in the leaves. Monocot leaves have parallel veins, whereas dicot leaves have a branching network of veins. And finally, monocots have floral parts of 3, and dicots have floral parts in multiples of 4 or 5. But let's look at some of the similarities. For starters, they're both plants, and they both have roots, and they both have a stem and leaves. You guys are all on your way to becoming great botanists. Gee willikers, how great was that? The kids took the lesson and were able to compare the two types. I, for one, am glad I got to learn all about monocots and dicots. It will certainly help me grow beautiful flowers this year. I can smell them now. Sorry about that, boys and girls. I'm just excited for spring, and I couldn't help but think of all the beautiful flowers. Well, that's it for today's episode of Try Science. We want to thank all of the students from North Star for participating, and a big thanks to Miss Tiberi for being such an awesome teacher. I'll leave you with the following Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Have a great day, boys and girls.